Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. What is the state of Ghana? The president knows it. Sure, he knows it better than all of you. He's built more roads than any other government in the Fourth Republic. He has evidence to show for that. He's constructed more railways than any other government in the Fourth Republic. He's taking care of the Zongo and inner city communities by way of infrastructure than any other government in the Fourth Republic. He has constructed more NCA licensed fiber optic cable than any other government in the Fourth Republic. He's done 93% in total. He's increased the proportion of the population with access to toilet facilities from 33% to 59%. He's increased the number of public libraries from 61 since independence, or from independence until 2017 to 115 in 2022. He's ensured there's been provision of more equipment, vehicles, ammunition, etc. to security services than any other government in the Fourth Republic. He has successfully implemented the digital address system, improved significantly financing of governance and anti-corruption MDAs like the Attorney General, the NCCE, SHRAJ, EOCO, and the Special Prosecutor. He has implemented one district, one factory, and in 4 years, 106 companies are in operation. 148 factories are under construction. He's established Africa's first national-scale electronic pharmacy platform. In fact, some of the first that he has superintended in this country go beyond previous governments. Some are the best in the world, not in Africa. What do you know to be the state of the economy? Some say the president is living elsewhere and not in Ghana. Where is your evidence? One soldier has been murdered, killed by people we are yet to know why they killed him. Was it because of a woman or for some other reason? The death of that soldier has brought a suspension of the rule of law in Ghana, and the military take over the job of the police and do it with a lot of brutalization, with pictures to show. And this is justified. Many were arrested under the operation. They have been released because no crime found against them. Or what is the reason? The police say they have arrested key suspects without brutalizing anybody. We'll be right back to deal with the Vex Matters. Welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And here is Samson's take. As I promised you, part 2 of Kojo Dame President, promote RTI, punish the violations. Occupy Ghana has been telling the story of how the Lands Commission is failing, neglecting, or refusing to act like a public service provider with professionals, despite being fined 100,000 by the RTI Commission for such conduct. In one of its rulings last week, the RTI Commission ordered the Lands Commission to release information requested by Occupy Ghana within 14 days. In its characteristic style, Occupy Ghana immediately wrote to bring their attention to the verdict and asked to know the cost and what form the disclosure will be made: photocopy, PDF, email, or it will be delivered on a pen drive. On Thursday, Occupy Ghana was compelled to write to remind them because, just as in their earlier process where it had to write about a dozen letters to get attention, the Lands Commission has once again elected to ignore its letters. But like it did in sending a letter every week on other demands, Occupy Ghana has vowed to send a reminder letter every day until the 14 days deadline expires next week. You can trust Occupy Ghana to sue if it becomes necessary. But all Occupy Ghana has asked for is information on state lands now owned by private persons or companies, and how they came to own what belonged to the state. When Sir John's will revealed the unthinkable and near impossibility, everybody cried foul play and corruption, and rightly so. But very typical of citizens and our media, we went to sleep. Occupy Ghana is not sleeping. It is pursuing the bizarre and scandalous Achimota Forest sales saga to its logical conclusion. This is all this is really about. Public lands are for the citizens. The Constitution is clear that these lands are vested in the President only as a trustee with fiduciary obligations to account to us how he manages these properties on our behalf. Yet the Lands Commission, after initially expressing readiness to provide the information, changed its posture, forcing Occupy Ghana to appeal to the Right to Information Commission. Ace Ankuma and his team have done even more on various serious public interest matters, including pursuing the Office of Special Prosecutor to investigate the unnamed wealthy businessman who bribed some MPs over the Oforiata vote of no confidence motion. You remember that? Many have forgotten. And the politicians know it was slide. Occupy Ghana says no. The guys at Occupy Ghana have used their money to fund expensive lawsuits that bring them no private gain, and have gotten laws passed, even laws passed to improve accountability and transparency for the citizens. Those of you, especially NDC folk, who ignorantly or deliberately, maliciously shout that Occupy Ghana has gone to sleep in the MPP regime, no. If you did a quarter of the heavy lifting legal brain work that Occupy Ghana has been doing, Ghana would be a lot better. It's not always noise and hitting the streets. Fix the country's Oliver Barker-Vormawor chased information the National Security Ministry was forced by public outcry to promise over the illegal and unconstitutional assault of City FM's Caleb Kuda. They did not mean what they promised in the heat of the story. They knew Ghanaians will forget in only a few weeks. But when Oliver pursued them, they ignored him completely, leading to the RTI Commission's ruling ordering them to disclose non-exempt portions of the information requested within 14 days. The Fourth Estate, the Media Foundation for West Africa's Public Interest and Accountability Investigative Journalism Project, also got orders compelling the GES to release information on COVID-19 spraying exercises found by Manasseh Azori-Awini to have been a conduit for grand corruption and waste. The Fourth Estate has been acknowledged as the biggest user of the RTI law. This is the group you, and you know yourselves, have for whatever purposes, obviously not in the national interest, made it your job to attack and abuse them simply because they churn out well-researched and investigative stories that save Ghana millions and expose rots in our society. The RTI Commission's intervention was sought by Kofi Asare of Africa Education Watch for the release of information on schools' placements. Information the ministry used to publish without anybody asking. In most of these cases, as I noted last week, the applications were not even acknowledged. What disrespect to citizens. Yes, not even when the RTI Commission requested responses from these institutions. So you want us to give you a job, pay you every month without fail, but for you to treat information generated with our money as though it were your private property? You clearly do not understand public service and must be deemed unfit to hold public office set up and funded by the public for service to the public. Dear Attorney General, I make my call once again. Information Minister, Mr. President, it is your duty to demonstrate you are not complicit. Publicly denounce the disgraceful conduct. Dismiss these heads of institutions embarrassing government and giving the country such a bad name. You must insist they pay the fines from their own pockets. Mr. President, when you signed this law in 2019, you said it was the mother of all anti-corruption laws. Yes, you were right. But that is if the law works. And that is my take. We'll be right back, joined by my guest for this morning to discuss the vexed matters. Rule of law suspended because a soldier is killed? You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And as always, here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strongest group and closest partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on MTN to join. Duraplus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplus goes, water definitely flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing, your housing dreams become reality. My guest this morning, Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Tua, Associate Professor, School of Law, University of Ghana, Legon. Dr. Theo Echampong is Political Risk Analyst. And for the second segment of our discussion, we have on the State of the Nation, we have Dr. Stephen Amwa, who is MP in Shaiso, financial economist and member Finance Committee of Parliament. Of course, his status appears to be changing, so he's Deputy Minister Designate for the Ministry of Trade. Samuel Neti George is MP, Ningo Pram, Deputy Ranking Member Communications Committee of Parliament and Member Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. Of course, we shall also be joined by Mary Awalana Ada, who is Programs Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us. Good morning to you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great,
Sir.
great. So let me begin by taking you to the Ashaiman community that was visited by the soldiers, and that is the reason we are having right. So we woke up to the news that a young soldier known to play the trumpet so very well, 21-year-old Sheriff Imoro, had come from his station to Accra for a training and sought permission to visit his mother in the Ashaiman community. It was during that visit that he met his untimely death. Then the community was greeted by military personnel who were on rampage on Tuesday, March 7, with helicopters and armored vehicles. Civilians were brutalized. This, by our count, circumstances of military brutality that we have been able to count, this will be the 10th in less than 3 years. Professor Kwesi, Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Tua, let's start with you, Professor Appiah-Tua. I'm sure you have read the military's response. What would you say?
Samson, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I feel outraged. I feel dismayed. I feel so disappointed about what has taken place in Ghana, in 21st century Ghana, 2023, after 30 years of return to constitutional rule, where the rule of law is supposed to work and for people to be considered as citizens, not spectators, in the own words of our president. What happened really takes us years back, generations back, and it's a sore reminder of our past. Some of us who experienced a little bit of military rule and the fact that there was lawlessness and disorderliness. I think that is what's happened at Ashaiman. And it violates every law in the books. The Constitution is clear about how citizens should be treated. The fact that we have a whole chapter in the Constitution on human rights, and for the dignity of human beings to be degraded to that level is appalling. It's just condemnable in the strongest terms. And it is the wish of every well-meaning Ghanaian that action should be taken to make sure that this matter is not pushed under the carpet, but the people involved are duly sanctioned and punished.
To be frank with you, when I saw those footages and pictures, I doubted that this was Ghana.
Yes.
I doubted that this was Ghana, where in your constitution you put there in Article 15 that the dignity of all persons shall be inviolable. No person shall, whether or not he is arrested, emphasis, whether or not he is arrested, restricted, or detained, be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, or any other condition that detracts or is likely to detract from his dignity and worth as a human being. How does this coexist with what we have just witnessed in the country?
Well, the two can never go together. The rule is that the Constitution, as you rightly said, the dignity of the human person is supposed to be protected. The same Constitution talks about the fact that everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty. What took place was an extrajudicial act aimed at brutalizing innocent people. It was claimed to be an intelligence-led operation, but it was not. The police had a role to play. The police started something. The army came and usurped that responsibility placed on the police. And the police went mum, which is also very shocking and frightening if the police cannot protect us. And so in this situation, we see where rule of law has been shoved aside. It's not only the Constitution that we can refer to. Ghana is a state party to the Convention Against Torture, Cruel and other forms of degrading treatment and punishment. Ghana is a state party to that. We've had a special rapporteur visiting the country, visiting our prisons, to look at how the country's laws respect torture and how torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment is actually respected in the country. And the report was not very good. And so this is going to add to the stock of our record. And it's just not the right way to go.
The question again, looking at the Constitution, about all Ghanaians or all persons being equal before the law. The law says that even, and I'm quoting, where a person is charged with a criminal offense, he shall be presumed to be innocent until he is proved or has pleaded guilty. You may have all these beautiful things in your Constitution and your jurisprudence, which in the law courts, it is better that 100 guilty persons should escape than that one innocent person should suffer. But in a situation where, in the face of these same laws, that says you don't have the right to take another person's life. If people take the life of another person, will this not be justified? Some have justified this.
It cannot be justified because we have laws that regulate such matters. What we are seeing on your screen, it reminds us about slavery. It reminds us about how our ancestors were lined up, packed like sardines, whipped, beaten, and taken across the Atlantic to the Caribbean and to the New World. What we are experiencing is a violation of the Constitution because the Constitution talks about the fact that apart from being presumed innocent, even where such matters are to be resolved, Article 12.1 says that the responsibility is placed on the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, and other organs of the state to respect the constitutional provisions on rights. So when you look at the way the whole operation went about, and the defense minister says that it was sanctioned from above by the military high command, and the military high command is under the control and direction of the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, who is the president of the republic, then it looks like we are applying the law in a way that favors the people in uniform, as has also been confirmed by the Minister of Defense, that we should respect people in uniform. And then another commentary is that we need to be disciplined. And so what they did is to discipline us. But that is not the way the law works. It is the work of the police. Just yesterday, I read on your portal that the police have made some arrests. And there was a previous information that some investigations were being conducted by the police. This is how the law is supposed to work. And so if somebody, the killing of that young man, unfortunately, is a very sad story. And incidentally, I have a nephew who is a very close friend of this young man who passed away. And before all this mayhem would be unleashed on the people, we were all expressing our regrets and even to our young boy. So it is not that people want to overlook what happened, but the law must be made to work. People are presumed innocent. So if you conduct a swoop and you arrest 184 or more people, and then you beat them up, not only the torture they suffered at Ashaiman, but also at where they were taken to, some were even made to lap like dogs and so on, and then left almost naked to return home without a word of even apology from the military high command, shows how degraded the whole armed forces has been reduced to for what they did. And so we need to let the law work and make sure that due punishment is meted out so that there will be order in the society. People will not be afraid of the police. I want to refer you to a case decided by Justice Akabuafu, in which he made a point clear that the people in uniform should not be made to do things according to their own way. And this is the case of Republic versus Chief Superintendent Lydia Y. Donko and DSP E. ex parte Mohammed S. Okaija. It's a 2016 case. And he said, I think that as a country with a history of abuse of constitutional rights of citizens by persons in uniform who loved to, quote, show citizens where power lies, unquote, at this time of our democratic dispensation, the police are expected to comply with the law, especially the Constitution, in the discharge of their duties. So this is a case where a soldier has been allowed to run on a rampage and destroy properties. And the police could not arrest him because he's a person in uniform. So the need for the police to also do their work is very critical, so that they by now these people should have been arrested and dealt with, or at least the police should make the attempt for us to know that if they are not successful, then there are some big powers behind them, and we'll be able to identify where to pinpoint the blame and to demand accountability.
Right. I'll return to you shortly to find out what ought to be done now and immediately. There are those who have raised the questions that the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, has been terribly disappointing, that he had not a single word for this in his State of the Nation address. And since then, he has said absolutely nothing. Not even, to start with, express, grief with the family that has lost their young boy, and to talk about what the army have done. There are those who say that in any civilized country, in any country worthy of the name a democracy, by now, many heads would have rolled, and the soldiers involved would have been standing, going through a process by now. Professor Kwesi, do I have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Right. So, Prof, I remember when Major Mahama was murdered. I had you on this show, and my production had to help take off some footage, on the screens, because I just couldn't help it. I just couldn't hold my tears back when we're talking about him at the time. I have to do this job, but I can assure you that as I look at these pictures, it just doesn't help me. I wish that we would not be playing them back. What's going through your mind as you saw these pictures and you continue to see them this morning on this television?
There was a sense of shock, of sadness, and a sense of failure. Failure not in the context of that we could not prevent it, but failure in the sense that all the hard work that has been done to try to build a society in which those in service understand their role for what it is. That when we use taxpayers' money to train you, to feed you, to educate you, arm you, that your role is to serve. But service also has a synergistic relationship, that those who are served accept that service and in return have a dialogic, consensual, respectful, collaborative relationship. And my dismay at the failure is that after almost 20 years or so of hard work seeking to build and improve civil-military relations, I think you've cited 10 cases, that we don't seem to be learning any lessons at all. And the failure is not only from the military side. The failure is also from the civil or civilian oversight side. And I want particularly here, and I think my brother Etua has taken us, through the history, the rule of law side. But I think we need to understand that what also took place is part of that long cultural, historical struggle within the army itself to move away from the bomkutuku mentality. We've always applied the bomkutuku, and this I'm borrowing from Raymond Atumuba, culture that says, I'm not going to argue with you. I'll give you a couple of very dirty slaps, and that will change you. So if we do a discourse analysis of what we had in the film, Monsieur Yansa, I will teach you sense so that next time you will behave differently. Now, when someone says, Monsieur Yansa, learn to be either wise, intelligent, or behave in a particular way, whilst that same person is flouting your rights, then it creates a particular type of danger, because it tells you the way that threats are constructed and how enemies are imagined and reimagined. So Monsieur Yansa It's a phrase used by probably somebody who doesn't even know what instructions he has been given, apart from go to Ashaiman, arrest some people, blah, blah, blah. The other point I want to raise is the excessive inflation in the use of the word or the words intelligence-led. When we say something is intelligence-led, then it is sharp, pinpointed, specific, and deliberate. So an intelligence-led operation that seizes 184 people, brutalized, and if you see the picture of those guys lying in mud, and there's a particular way in which during war you treat people in ways that dehumanizes and takes away their sense of self-respect and humanity. So when you let them, yes, this particular picture, when you let them wade in mud, excuse my language, like pigs, what you do is that you seek to dehumanize those that you are brutalizing and teaching sense to, so that you create societies of fear and societies of abuse, where that abuse is respected and accepted as the norm. So there's a historicity to this. But Samson, part of my pain and this abiding sense of failure also relates to the discursive language used by our political class. So the Parliamentary Committee on Defense and Interior sympathizes not with the family, but with the Ghana Armed Forces as an institution for losing one of their personnel. That is okay. But then the Parliamentary Committee then says, look, we need to be careful about how we handle this case so we don't worsen it. That is not the way oversight must be done. Oversight, and particularly parliamentary oversight, dealing with interior, defense, and intelligence is about ensuring that the public faith in these institutions are kept.
Yeah. Prof, you are referring to a committee that spoke to the nation through its chairperson.
Yeah.
And who said they had to be careful not to say things that will inflame passions or suggest that they are supporting one side against the other.
Yeah. But that's not how...
Does that chairperson command the credibility to be making those statements? And have you followed him after he made those statements of caution? What else he has said on TV and radio?
No, Samson, I've been chasing Al-Qaeda as it comes down south. So for the past couple of weeks, that is what I've been doing.
I don't think you should take him seriously, with the greatest of respect.
No, we should, because that statement will be looked at by the International Parliamentary Union, and they will say, oh dear.
But Prof, this is a man who sits on television, and over the Ejura shootings, where the military once again were faulted for killing, he sits on radio and TV and says that a journalist should be beaten. And he has said this before. This is not his first time. He says that if I were the president, I'll grab this journalist and beat the hell out of him. This is the man that is worthy of chairing such a sensitive committee in Parliament and leading them to talk at this time, and you want me to take him serious?
Because the rest of the world is looking at the position that he occupies. And the rest of the world is saying, okay, this is how Ghana wants to do oversight. This is how, under Ghana's democratic dispensation, respect for human rights and the rule of law must be contextualized. So irrespective of what we think within the Ghanaian domestic space, this is a reputational issue for this country. So that when citizens are brutalized, when citizens live in societies of fear because the institution that is supposed to protect them become instruments of threat, then those who ought to play that oversight role and don't seem to want to do so because it's not a time to make utterances that may inflame passions. The rest of the world then says, hang on, what is happening here? So what has taken
Prof, sorry, but this small bit, and because you are putting such, such leverage, or I don't know how else to describe it, on what such a person says, but the whole world also knows that this same person has called for arms, has asked one tribe to hit the other, and has actually been prosecuted by this state for those, very, very reckless comments. So why should that person be the one to lead a parliamentary committee to say anything for anyone to take them serious?
Well, Samson, unfortunately, the Republic of Ghana and the party that he represents thinks this person is the most competent. But I think we need to move from the person and say, how must parliamentary oversight be done? Because there are other people who also sit on this same committee who are loudly silent from the other side. You see, so what I'm saying is that there's a general failure of Parliament to be seen to be playing its oversight role and assuaging the fears of the people of this republic. And
Prof, what can Parliament do where many say the commander-in-chief has failed, completely failed? In less than 3 years, 10 accounts of the military storming and brutalizing innocent citizens because someone's phone is lost.
Yeah, quite it. But Samson, there's even a more disturbing thing that we've swept under the carpet. The military invasion of Parliament prior to the last inauguration of the president. Now, so there's a much bigger issue that we are looking at. What role must the army play in a democracy? And how can the oversight institutions play the role that serves as a check, monitors how they work, and how the institutions, the council, blah, 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 how do they work to ensure that there's a collaborative relationship that inures to the benefit of the people? But Samson, my last point. When an institution says we are using an intelligence-led operation to flush out those who have threatened and murdered a young official, and taking into consideration where we are located, the increasingly downward movement of terrorist groups, and knowing that in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, Chad, that the spread of extremist violence is directly and positively correlated to how statutory security forces treat their citizens, then I think the Ghana Armed Forces did not do.
Prof, there are those who say, and I'm already getting comments, people asking me, how can a lawyer be asking whether what is happening is justified? My job here is not to tell you that I'm a lawyer. My job here is to play the devil's advocate. So when I ask Professor Appiagyei that can this be justified, that's not my opinion, it's a question. because there's a section of the public there that are being told by respected people, including ex-military or security officers, that this is justified. In fact, they are saying that Ashaiman we are playing the ostrich because it's quote unquote a den of criminals. And therefore, if the military has to use this kind of approach to weaken them, to beat them down, we should support it.
I take very strong exception to my dear friend, Dr. Norman. There is nowhere in this world where the military should routinely go out there and teach people a lesson. So if I had gone to Ashaiman with my students to say, how do we better understand hybrid forms of security provision and how communities that live on the fringes of society seek to provide themselves with some security, my students and I would have been caught in this brutality. And therein lies the danger when people say, oh, the routine use of violence to intimidate and to sow fear is legitimate. It can never be legitimized, because I know myself that were something to happen, I can tell you, Samson, I will receive a couple of very dirty slaps. And as an old man, I cannot run very far. So I know my life will be at risk. And that's why it's crucial and important that the rule of law and the respect for human rights must always be at the center of these conversations and the way that we behave as people serving the Republic of Ghana. But
Prof,
you see, if Al-Qaeda came to Ashaiman now, or Islamic State, and said, look, we want to recruit, what do you think would happen? And I think some heads must roll, because the brutalities that we've seen has heightened the vulnerabilities that we already face. And I'm hoping
which are these heads that must roll?
I mean, when somebody says that the military high command sanctioned it, so who in the high command planned this intervention? And what were the rules of engagement? Were the rules of engagement in such a manner that you go out there and use violence to seek to get the information? Because if the Ghana Police Service has been able to get access to the information that is needed without this undue brutality, then we need to raise and ask some really very
head that must roll. We all know in decent communities, many resignations would have been flying already. Where this is not happening, whose job is it to ensure that whose head, is rolling?
Well, Samson, you know that in this country, I remember His Excellency the President as candidate, Akufo-Addo, always used to say, the buck stops with the president. So certainly, as Commander-in-Chief, he must be asking, what are the risk and threat assessments that were made prior to this intelligence-led operation? In terms of how the operation was carried out, what can be the unintended fallouts for the wider security of Ghana? And I can say very confident, sitting where I am sitting, that the unintended fallout is very negative. Because if you listen to the discourse, if you talk to people, if you put your ears to the ground, people are frustrated, people are angry, people want to...
Prof, you keep using the expression intelligence operation.
Yeah.
Intelligence operation. And earlier you have suggested there's nothing intelligent about the operation. Because as we understand from the residents, they just were going around, they were not actually sure where exactly they were going, and they were picking people from various points and taking them to one point, asking them to, as it were, get on the floor, do press-ups, roll over in the mud, and we have seen all the bruises all over the people. An intelligence operation picks up as many as 184 suspects.
Yeah.
And in the end, all of them released. Should you continue to use the expression intelligence operation?
Oh, that is their word or their physiology. But the way we are describing it means that they've got to come back to us with maturity, with humility, and then say, we got it wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. The continued insistence that this was an operation, intelligence-led operation, makes that physiology laughable. And I think it puts us in a very tight spot. I think there are several cases where operations do go wrong. Okay? And I think there have been some intimations that, yes, the operation did not pan out as had been planned. So we should take the next step and begin the process of reconciliation, of rebuilding bridges, and of asking ourselves some very fundamental questions. How do we create trust in this very crucial institution that we still do need?
We were informed, and the police have now confirmed that they have arrested key suspects in the murder of Imoro Sharif, and that it took them a week of sustained intelligence-led operation to arrest the suspects they say are involved in the murder. We are told that this was already known at the time the military went to do what they did. What do you know, sir?
Well, I think the key question now is about the sequencing of how this information is being fed to the public in trickles. And therein lies the mistrust, therein lies the public's concern as to where lies the truth. And I think it is crucial that the institutions involved themselves, come clean and say something went wrong.
Initially, the suggestion was that, and this will be my final question before I go to Professor PJ. The suggestion was that there is general mistrust in the police, in the police's competence to fish out those who committed this very dastardly act. And the belief is that if the military went in there, they will be successful. Of course, by the police's statement, this kind of projection has been defeated. But is that the case?
Well, months ago, the Inspector General of Police spoke about historical perceptions about the police. And I think if the police have gone in, put them, and used sustained intelligence-led operations over the span of 1 week without brutalizing anyone, then I think they have done well. And I think it shows in sharp relief the lack of coordination, the lack of trust, the lack of sharing of information amongst statutory security institutions.
Prof, will it be a question of lack of sharing of information, or that the military simply needed to do this at all costs, whether or not they were aware that somebody had been picked up?
Samson, at all costs, and to what end? The military is not an island unto itself. The military has been established to protect the sanctity of the state.
Yes, but you dare not touch any member, any person in uniform. That's the point they are showing you.
Oh, yes. That is the point they intend to show. And I think we do agree that every life is sacrosanct and that somebody being in uniform must, under no conditions, make that person more susceptible to violence. That is not acceptable. But the military itself must accept that the rationale for the establishment military repelling external threats is beginning to change. That now the threat is from within, increasingly. And that these types of actions from Ejura, Wa, and all the 10 cases is creating an understanding or a perception that the realization that the threat is also domestic, and therefore the way we treat citizens is crucial and critical to not exacerbating the frustrations of citizens that can lead to recruitment and radicalization. Probably is not well understood. They must understand it, that actions have consequences, and that we cannot have a combination of both the external and the internal conflating to create insecurities for the general population.
Right. Let me go to Professor Piaget now. Professor Piaget, immediate actions, what exactly should be happening? I understand, I don't know what connection you may have with the group of lawyers. I know that a group of lawyers have been assembled by Oliver Bakavomawo, and they are in the town. They are in Ashaiman, in the communities. They have been speaking with the victims. They have been taking down their details and trying to produce what they say is a report that may not be only for the purposes of taking action here to also seek compensation for the people, but that may go beyond the borders of Ghana. I understand these lawyers are just volunteering. There's no financial incentive for it. They are going around speaking to the people and getting their harrowing stories. Beyond that sort of process, the condemnation by Shraj is very shocked at this. What should happen?
Thank you. Yeah, I think what we are trying to do on the ground is very important. That is to get the information that will be used as evidence. And one information I got is that almost every house was touched because information filtered around that the soldiers were in the community and people were advised not to step out. And so message moved from one place to the other. Those who were caught were those who couldn't get the news. And therefore the soldiers had to enter into houses, break down doors, and drag people out of their homes.
And they blocked the roads.
Sorry?
They blocked the roads.
Yes, they blocked the roads and to ensure that they round up people with the help of the helicopters providing some information to the soldiers on the ground. So this is a typical conflict zone situation that was witnessed. And so information is being collected to be able to know the extent of damage done, not only to people's dignity and to their health and livelihood, but also to property itself. And so that is, some work is being done in that regard. And there's also an attempt to get the Ghana Psychological Association to provide counseling for the victims. And we are making some progress in that direction as well. As to what to do with the information, I think, of course, we have to look at internally as well as externally. Internally, Shraj is one place to go. Of course, with Shraj, we have to actually make a complaint, a petition before they can take up the matter. So we appreciate the fact that this time they've come out to condemn the act, which is what a body like a National Human Rights Institution is supposed to do. And so Shraj is one place to go. Of course, the courts are also available. And we also want to go to Parliament and make sure that Parliament, the Committee on Security and Interior, Defense and Interior will also do more than what they have said they were going to do. We think that they should have already been there on the ground to gather the information and to talk to people. But the information we are getting is that probably they want things to calm down a bit first. But they are not the perpetrators. They rather want to be on the side of the people. And so there shouldn't be any fear for them going to the ground now. Externally, one sure place to go to look up to is to make a case to use the special procedures available under the UN Human Rights System. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, there's a procedure system. And then the ECOWAS Court of Justice is also there. With that, you don't need to exhaust local remedies. You can take your case to them at any time. Because we want to be sure that we know, as Professor Anyenini said, who gave the order, who sat down and designed the rules of engagement.
But why do you want to embarrass the nation this further at official, courtesies internationally? Why do you want to do this?
It is not about embarrassing the nation. It is about putting things right, because Ghana is a state party to a number of human rights treaties, including the one on Convention Against Torture. And as a party, a state party, you are supposed to make periodic state reports. And so in the next 2 years or 3 years, when Ghana's next report is due, it is supposed to comment on this, supposed to talk about this in the state report. So if, so far, looking at the information that we are getting and looking at the posture of government, we don't see a situation where the government has even rendered an apology. Any form of supposed apology is only unfortunate and face-saving and, in fact, irresponsible and insensitive to the plight of the people who have been on the other end of the brutality. So we think that that will also put a sense of responsibility in the government to take things very seriously.
How bad is it that the president has said nothing about this so far? And the defense minister, deputy defense, we have heard counter, statements. One comes to say, we will not apologize for this. The defense minister says these things should be expected. Some of these things should be expected. What do you say?
I think that it casts a very bad image on Ghana's reputation as a democracy. And so definitely in our next state report, whether by U.S. State Department or which of Freedom House and so on, Ghana's rating is going to go down because of this brutality which has been meted out to the citizens. And the buck stops with the president. He's the commander-in-chief. And he himself has said it before, that in such situations, that is what should happen. And your slides talk about how there's been a pattern of brutality. And what is very important to note is that in this case, in the Wa case, to some extent to the Jura case and so on, the soldiers may have gone on a frolic of their own, but this one was a so-called intelligence-led operation orchestrated by the military high command. And whether it went haywire or not, which I don't believe that was the case, something has gone wrong and somebody should own up. And so far, nobody has owned up, and the president should do so. So not saying anything at all is very, very unfortunate.
Prof, I'll make this confession to you. In the course of the week since this happened, I've had numerous calls from respected statesmen and women. I've had calls from even outside of this country. And among the impression is that if the right thing is not done by the leadership, it is the Ghanaian citizen, civil society, and respected voices like yours and Professor Kwesi Anyenini to blame, because you seem to treat this, and the media more particularly, you seem to treat this as another normal occurrence. That's why you have had as many as 10 recorded in less than 3 years under the watch of a human rights lawyer as president.
That's right. That is why, for example, we are looking at going external as well, because we want to make sure that the image of Ghana is protected and held intact. And we also want to make sure that these brutalities are not normalized. They are not accepted as a rule. I've also received a number of messages that say that I'm on the wrong side of the fence and that the people need to be treated the way they have been treated. Again, this idea of Ashaiman being a den of thieves and criminals is portrayed that we need to put sense into them. The police are ineffective, incompetent, corrupt. Therefore, the army should do the job for them. And my response is, hello, aren't we living in a democratic dispensation? The soldiers, there's what we call accountability. And the soldiers are supposed to be accountable to a civilian authority. And the civilian authority is the commander-in-chief. And he should make sure that by this time there would have been some dismissals, and if people would not resign, there would have been some dismissals. He would have at least made a statement.
The thing that has been sanctioned by the High Command, who is doing what dismissals?
Of course, there is a commander-in-chief, because if they would talk to him that maybe they said it was an intelligence-led operation, but it has proven that it wasn't an intelligence-led operation. It was a swoop, and which led to many innocent people, almost everybody who was arrested. And what did they find? Some slabs of cocaine and so on. That is not what they were going to look for. So the government, the president should own up, and he should dissociate himself from the statement made by the Minister of Defense and the Deputy Minister to say that, no, this is not how this process should have gone. This is not how the operation should have been orchestrated. So you are suspended, you are dismissed. There are rules, there are tribunals under the Security and Intelligence Act, the Armed Forces Act, the Police Service Act. There are rules there. The Constitution tells about the responsibilities of the police. And that should also be one place to look at, the checking of responsibility on the part of the police for not coming out and taking any action to ensure that these soldiers are also dealt with according to the criminal laws of the country. It's something that also needs to be looked at.
Prof, just 30 seconds before I let you go. There's been this thing about, they said they are rounding up the people, they are taking them to one place, and then they were handing them over to the military police. And some have said, well, the military police, that is a rightful process to deal with. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, the military police is supposed to coordinate the activities, because if any made that point, coordination is lacking. The military police can take up certain responsibilities that the Ghana Police Service is supposed to do, but they coordinate. They are supposed to share intelligence, and they're supposed to determine where the military police comes in, and then where the Ghana Police Service also does their job.
When a civilian does something against a uniformed person, the military police can arrest them and deal with them.
There is to an extent to which they can do, because even ordinary citizens like you and myself can cause arrest where there is reasonable suspicion or the person is caught in the act. But unfortunately, this is what we see with the swoop that took place.
I asked that question because I'm aware of situations where civilians are arrested and put in cells in the military police.
Yeah, so the function of the military police is mainly to deal with, usually with incidents involving the military, where military personnel are involved. But in the end, they work together with the Ghana police. And secondly, when the Ghana police seems to be overwhelmed or need extra support, they also turn to the military police to help.
So that, do I have and I need one clear answer, straight answer to this. Are you telling Ghanaians that if you offend a military officer or you offend a relation, someone whose relative is a military man, military police can come pick you up and take you to their cells and deal with you?
No.
But that is happening in this country. That is happening in this country.
Yeah, of course, that is what is happening, and that is what we are condemning. That is not how it works at all. Yes.
Okay.
That coordination should be there with Ghana Police.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Now, let me get your brief comments, my guests in the studio, before we take a break and return to look at the state of the nation. So I'll begin with you, Sam George.
Well, Samson, very good morning to you and very good morning to our viewers. And permit me to say a belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
My condolences go to the family of the slain 22-year-old soldier, Imoro. Loss of life of any man or woman who has taken an oath to serve his country in any capacity is most unacceptable. In fact, the unfortunate loss of any Ghanaian life is most unfortunate. But in this instance, given the manner in which his life was taken, I share my condolences with the family. And you just need to see the reaction of his mother and how broken she is, and the problems that is going to bring to that family. To know that your son, especially in the manner in which he was killed, in the area where he grew up, is most unfortunate. That said, to whom much is given, much is expected. There's a reason why we're being asked to respect the men and women in uniform. It's because they have a certain training that we, for quotes, want of a better phrase, bloody civilians don't have. They have a certain training that makes it, puts a certain burden of responsibility on them. We have seen too many reckless actions. And something, I have always held the view that the penchant of using our military as the first course of resort in interfacing with civilian populations is a recipe for disaster. Our military is absolutely not trained. We have some of the finest military officers in the world. Take it from me. And I've seen Ghanaian troops across the world. I had the opportunity of visiting Lebanon and went on a personal private visit to our troops there. And you just need to hear the praises on Ghanaian troops in Lebanon. We have very professional officers. However, that professional training does not extend to engagement with civilian population. The police is trained for that. The police is trained in crowd control, civilian control. The military is trained in suppression. And that is why every time we have seen the military, be it in Ejura, be it during the 2020 elections in Techiman, or in Odododio Ablekuma Central, or be it in Wa or in Boku, it has always had disastrous consequences with the loss of life. The military is simply not trained for that. We should stop putting the military in the forefront. And for me,
obviously, unlike the police or military, the police, they are trained to, if they have to arrest a suspect, they are trained to read to them their rights.
Absolutely.
And tell you that you are being arrested because you have done so and so. You have a right to remain silent. Otherwise, anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. And also to tell you that you have a right to call a lawyer of your choice to assist you. Yeah. The military, nobody teaches them this.
Absolutely. They are not trained for this. And
because that's not their purpose.
That's not their purpose. The military's purpose is not to engage in I mean, a lot of respect for my learned senior Professor Enin, who I must state was a great resource for me in my dissertation that I did in my studies. But I mean, like you rightly put, there was nothing intelligent about what happened in Ashaiman. The military has military intelligence, which is a wing that is versed and trained in gathering intelligence. I want to understand how intelligence gathering or an intelligence-led operation would involve lashing 184 men and asking elderly women to lie in pools of water, picking bottles and fetching water from gutters, dirty water from gutters, and giving to Ghanaian citizens whose taxpayers was used to fuel the armored personnel carriers and helicopters. How is that intelligence-led? Our military has goofed. I have great respect for the military, but the military high commander sanctioned this.
There are those who say there's a lot of indiscipline in this country. A generation that doesn't know how to respect elders and things. So you need some of these things once in a while to put the fear of God in people.
Well, given the asymmetric nature of national security, which Professor Anyenini spoke about again, and the threat of terror, what you're actually doing is beginning to build a cadre that is going to get angry, a cadre of young people that's going to get angry at our military. And if you're not careful, you're going to begin to see a lot of young people take up the law to take on the military. And so what the military is actually doing is actually going to exacerbate the problem.
So what should happen?
What should happen is, first and foremost, we must see discipline from within the military itself. This must be a watershed moment for us as a country, especially because the military high command takes responsibility for this. We must see the commander-in-chief himself take front and center role in this matter and demand answers of his military high command, the rank and file of the military that sanctioned this operation. This is a democracy. We cannot continue to have this. And Samson, look, it could have been me. Tulaku is a part of Ashaiman I use every day when going to my constituency, because Michelle Camp is the boundary of my constituency, and most of these officers were from Michelle Camp. So I could have been caught in that fire. Any of your reporters could have been going there to cover an early morning story. I mean, this could happen to anybody. And for someone who was in Aya, also West Wagon, I know what this can do to you. I know how it's the slightest thing that would lead to loss of life. So this is unacceptable, and we must condemn it in no uncertain terms.
Okay. Thank you. Can we hear, is Steve ready so we can hear him briefly? In the meantime, let me share just a few comments with you. And this is from Kofi Bento. He says, the army has embarrassed Ghana too many times by these lawless acts, from invading parliaments, Ejura, Ayawaso, etc., etc. Our politicians are proving incapable of exercising authority over them. That spells doom. There are nations without armies which are doing very well. It is not impossible for Ghana. There are some very prosperous nations like Costa Rica which do not keep an army. If this continues, we have to start thinking of disbanding them and working towards an ECOWAS force to fight terror or insurgents. Frank Anderson says, let's call this what it is. Persistent military thuggery backed by the commander-in-chief. These crimes include Ejura Techiman and so on. A serving British military officer was in 2003 killed on the streets of London, right next to a military barracks. We didn't see any officers launch any of such primitive acts or, frankly, military hooliganism. Unsurprisingly, the president hasn't condemned any of these or fired any head. No matter how long it takes for a change of government, these people must be brought to book. Let's stop saying this nonsense. The first basic training military officers are giving is not to harm any civilian, regardless of the provocation. These kinds of comments encourage unlawful acts against civilians. Read this one and we hear from Stephen. If you criticized Oliver Barker-Vormawor for the comments for which he is being prosecuted, remember he's being prosecuted for Facebook coup, and you are here defending the military who actually took the law into their own hands and forcibly usurped the power and authority of the Ghana police conferred by the Constitution, then you are a hypocrite. Yes, Stephen.
Okay, Samson. Sorry, thank you very much. My regards to our viewers and listeners this very morning. I think the most important factor to me this morning is to make sure that the victims, both the army officer who was killed and those who also suffered brutalities and their families are well consoled. And I want to join all those who are putting up these positions of empathy. I want to be with them to console the victims, and also to say that I think the right and the appropriate and effective investigation be conducted so that what is required by law will actually be implemented or pursued.
Investigations conducted by who?
Samson, you know, I'm not a lawyer. But
No, you just said investigation should be conducted.
What I'm saying is that the right investigation should be conducted. Who is supposed to do it or not? Because I'm not into those areas. I don't want to display my ego trips. But I think whoever is in the right position to ensure and conduct that thing, it has to be done.
Investigate what?
Whatever happened, you know what has happened.
Okay.
We need further info. People are giving different pieces of information, whether what they are saying is true or not. It should really be done in a way that we will not form wrong opinions. It will be bad. But I think the most important thing is how can psychologically the victims, especially the Ashaiman victims, and then the family of the army officer who was killed, can be managed so that they can really be in the right frame, right mind frame to go about their daily duties, and the right punishment, if they should, be also executed in a way that will serve as deterrent. But something, what I also want to say is that probably I'm struggling because I don't want to display my ego trips. I'm not an expert in some of these things, and even when it comes to the law. But what I can also say is that for about 40 years up to now, if we be honest with ourselves, these things have been happening, unfortunately, that you realize that, oh, army guys went to this community, assaulted or tortured the people there because one army officer had been dealt with in a bad way. It's been happening all the time. I think sometimes we have excepts of these things in the developed economies, but not in this magnitude. That when you see that, oh, maybe this young person, and you see footages, all these things must be condemned.
In the developed countries.
Yes, sometimes you see this in US and other places. UK that, oh, one person or just a few of them and the police, and you see them. Even if you Google now, you see some of them. They are all wrong. We need to condemn them. I don't think it is right.
But in the circumstances that any such thing happens, you follow what happens after that happens?
Oh, of course. You see the right decisions are taken. They just take them, I'm sure, out of investigation and know who and what went wrong. And that's why I'm calling for investigations. And something, one thing I also want to say is that we need to be we need to be careful we don't politicize this by our comments. All of us as a country. This is a very...
I'm not sure on this platform anybody has done so.
I'm not talking about platform.
Okay.
I'm even surprised you're also doing this. We are all talking to the entire country. It's a very unfortunate situation.
How can it be politicized?
I'm saying we shouldn't.
No, I'm asking you, how can it be politicized?
But our comments. When
How?
it happens...
How?
Something, when it happens like this...
That the president is the commander-in-chief at this time,
are you limiting
and that he has failed.
I haven't said that.
Something like that. I just want to have an idea what you mean by politicization.
Politicization, when these things happen, we live in this country. By experience of what we see, people politicize it. Probably some people think they want to make political capital out of that. People sometimes make statements.
So have you heard somebody politicize this so far?
No, can I have something?
I want an idea.
So when I end, then you ask me. Because it's like you're interrogating me. Let me finish. At least give me the freedom to also make my statement.
Well, you were just to make a brief comment on this. This is not what you are here to discuss.
Can I finish, please?
Okay.
I think you also accord me the needed space to do that. What I'm trying to say is that it is a fact that in times such as this, people do politicize it. So I'm advising against possible politicization, which of course, unless you tell me you're not in this country.
I haven't heard anybody politicize. That's why I'm asking
said somebody has done.
Okay.
Do we have to hear before we talk about it, or we say something that can prevent possible whatever comments? Two, we also have to make sure that as a country, we need to find a very permanent, perpetual solution to this unfortunate thing that has happened. These brutalities and the assault. I remember...
What's your prescription? Finding a permanent, perpetual solution.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming. When our late Army Officer Muhammad died, such an unfortunate issue, look at how the communities were also tortured by the army. It's wrong. Because there are a lot of innocent people in Ashaiman who have been included. Probably even all those who suffered, none of them played any role in this. That's what I'm saying. So as a country, it keeps on happening, it's reoccurring. What can we do going forward that these things will never happen again? That's all that I can say.
Okay.
And I also think all the security agencies should, and those whose jurisdiction also play a critical role in some of these things, come together, review all these incidents or events, unfortunate events that has happened for people to suffer, and come out with a framework that going forward, we can mitigate the impact of some of these things, because it's very unfortunate that happened in Ashaiman. That's all that I can say.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got some of your messages, but I'll share them right after this break. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. And it's brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneur leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. Duraplus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing, your housing dreams become reality. And my guests this morning have been Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, Professor Kwejo Appiah-Ejetia, Associate Professor, School of Law, University of Ghana. Here in the studio, Dr. Stephen Amoah, MP in Shaiso, and Samuel Nete George, MP Ningo Pram. We will be joined by Mary Ada also to do, she just joined us for the second part of the discussion. A few of your comments. Dr. Theo Champong also joins us now. A few comments now. Severus, you say there is a reason you separate the military and the police. One fights the enemies of the state. The other serves and protects the people. When the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tend to become the people. Interesting message. Charlie Rain says national security keeps sending SMS asking that when we see something, we say something. And now those that will protect us, the military, are the ones beating us. So who will we say something to when there is the fear that we will be beaten? Musa Abatar says the justification by the defense minister was absurd. It's ironically unjustified for anybody to support military coup in Ashaiman. Government has been reckless in providing security in a volatile area. The reaction of government in matters of security is always an afterthought. Theo Kofi says the murdered soldier was on a personal mission at Ashaiman. We have been made to believe he was on leave. This means he was not attacked in the course of duty. Well, how does it matter? Any attack is an attack. So I don't understand the action of the military. They should be ashamed of themselves. Well, you can say the military brought this upon themselves. You know, when Major Muhammad's issue happened, we were all weeping for Major Muhammad and talking for Major Muhammad's situation. But here we are, because of what they have done, you see, it has completely dwarfed even the murder being the focus of any discussion anywhere. Gary Seller, how can that be your name? Okay, intelligence-led operation, and they brutalized a whole community. Imagine there was no intelligence. What would have happened? Well, all of those people have actually been released, as we understand. You say what prevented us passing a Major Mahama bill that will specifically make lynching a very serious crime. Murder is crime. It's a serious crime in this country. Many people have been lynched, some innocently without any national show of revulsion. That is true. In any case, will a statue be erected for this young soldier also? Thank you for that question. Okay, thanks for those messages. This message is rather long, but I can read just a bit of it for you. Good morning. The Ashaiman incident is most unfortunate. Both the event leading to the death of the young military man and the reaction of the military personnel therefrom. The military must not take the law into their own hands and brutalize civilians anyhow. We have come a long way from the dark old days. Never in our history, pre-Fourth Republic and during the Fourth Republican constitutional dispensation, have the military resolved any matter with their human rights abuses. If what we are told is true, in the end, it is not the police. Is it not the police who have been able to arrest the culprit through their intelligence? So the military showmanship that was demonstrated did not help matters. Rather, it will affect our already low human rights record. Seth Asante, this is all I can read for you. Thank you very much. This one says he's in the security services and he's out of the country, and he was asked by, foreigners, what is going on in your country, and he was so ashamed. He says, I felt seriously embarrassed when my colleagues in office here in a country, I won't mention name, drew my attention to this brutality. They expressed shock and asked me what is happening in Ghana. I stood speechless when I stepped out of the office to the sitting area to watch the screen. The tendency for the deceased family to feel insecure in the community is high, as they will be tagged as being the reason behind the brutality of the innocent. Well, I doubt you are right. They may be there still. A final message from PK in Elembele. He says, in fact, how the president was silent on the military beatings in Ashaiman during the State of the Nation is a clear indication that the government is really in support of all the actions of the military. Can I say, but that's true. The defense minister has been clear, and the statement that has come from the Army High Command is clear. That is government action. Can I say they will use the military? Oh, sorry, I can't say that. Thank you very much. Now, the president was in Parliament to do a duty imposed upon him by the Constitution, to tell all of us through our representatives in Parliament what the state of our country is. And he did exactly that. Let's listen to him and return to the discussion.
President,
there are legitimate questions being asked about how the country's debt situation got to where it is. Mr. Speaker, let me state emphatically that we have not been reckless in borrowing and in spending.
Honorable members, I will allow spontaneous reaction to statements, but I will not allow debate of the statement. Your Excellency, you may proceed.
It is worth noting that the debts we're serving were not only contracted during the period of this administration. Mr. Speaker, we will spend money on things that are urgent, to build roads and bridges and schools, to train our young people and equip them to face a competitive world. Considering the amount of work that still needs to be done on the state of our roads, the bridges that have to be built, considering the number of classrooms that need to be built, the furniture and equipment needs at all stages of education, considering the number of children who should be in school and are not, considering the number of towns and villages Considering the number of towns and villages that still do not have access to potable water, I dare say no one can suggest we have overborrowed or spent recklessly. Yes, I've been in a hurry to get things done, and this includes massive developments in agriculture, education, health, irrigation, roads, rails, ports, airports, sea defense, digitization, social protection programs, industrialization, and tourism. We can be justifiably proud of the many things that we have managed to do in the past 6 years. As I go around the country, I hear the pleas for more roads, schools, hospitals, and as the rainy season comes, I wish, as every other Ghanaian does, that we would have built more drains than we have. And I wish we have the resources to do more. I've said, and many others, including the managing director of the IMF, have said that our economy was doing well until COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. Was doing well until COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine took us off course. That it is important to show clearly that the COVID-19 funds were not misused. It is critical that we do not lose the confidence of the people that a crisis that they were led to believe we were all in together was abused for personal gain. Mr. Speaker, it was government that asked for the COVID funds to be audited, and I can assure this House that nothing dishonorable was done with the COVID funds. The shortage of some childhood vaccines in the country has concerned me greatly. This shortage, if prolonged, will affect negatively Ghana's childhood immunization program, which has been recognized as one of the most successful in the world. The WHO has only recently expressed worry. Freedom of speech has now reached such heights that even members of the diplomatic corps feel able to join in our national discourse and pronounce on matters that will be problematic for Ghanaian diplomats in their countries of origin. The participation rate of 85%, representing tendered bonds of 83 billion cedis, out of the total eligible bonds of 97.7 billion cedis, constitutes significant success for the DDE program. The 83 billion cedis bonds that were successfully tendered also represents 64% of the outstanding domestic debt of 130 billion cedis at the end of December 2022, as pension funds have been expressly exempted from the DDEP. I want to take this opportunity to thank organized labor, pensioners, pension fund managers, the Ghana Association of Banks, the Ghana Securities Industry Association, the Ghana Insurance Association, the Individual Bondholders and Retirees Forum, and all others who have contributed to make the domestic debt exchange program a success. Mr. Speaker, I know it has been said over and over again in the past weeks, but the voluntary nature of the DDE program bears repeating, as is the fact that the government is committed to honoring all coupon payments and maturities in respect of both old bonds and the new bonds, in line with government fiscal commitments.
Right, so that was the president in Parliament. He said a number of things. The the minority particularly disagree. There are also others who disagree with some of the statements that he made, particularly with some of the things he touted as being first, achieved under him in the Fourth Republic, for as long as this nation has existed. He has shocked better than anyone else, some in Africa, and some of the achievements too, he says, it's Ghana that is leading in the world. You heard about using drones to supply medicine or medicine delivery. Right. Let me begin with Dr. Theo Echampong, political risk analyst. Thank you for making time to join us, Doc.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. And hello to everyone in the studio and to the audience.
Great. So, your thoughts?
Good question. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
In terms of what the state of the nation is, but I think it's obvious that Ghana is going through one of its most difficult periods in its recent history.
Yeah, he said it himself that he wanted to focus on the economy.
Absolutely, we'll come to the economy bit, but things are tough everywhere globally. Of course, Ghana is no exception in that regard, and we've seen inflation at 20-year highs. We've seen the local currency since last year lose a lot of value. We've seen our reserves dwindle. We've seen our debt go up, and the attempt to restructure all of that. But if you were to ask me what the sort of overall scorecard is in terms of the state of the nation, I would say it is not good. And it probably out of 10, I would probably rank it 5 out of 10 based on the current state of both the economy, but also on the social side of things, and even on the security side of things, as well. But what also concerns me really is part of the attempt by the president and certainly by government functionaries to deflect blame and to create the impression really that everything is down to COVID and down to Russia, Ukraine. And you can see some of the statements that the president made in some of the clips that you played.
Yeah, he's saying,
he said, quote unquote.
He said he predicated that statement by the fact that those of you for your preconceived agenda, that's what he called it, preconceived agenda, or maybe because of the severity of the economic circumstances, you are simply refusing to acknowledge that things were the best until COVID set in, and then Russia, Ukraine also hit us. And he says the managing director of the IMF, has even agreed that this is the case.
Yeah, so things were going well, but I have been on this program and others, and we have gone through some of the numbers. And what is very clear is that the country had an underlying ailment. I used to call it, we had the fiscal diabetes. So just like COVID, those that died and were said they had, diabetes and hypertension and you name it, it's pretty much the same thing with us. So this really idea that we were, quote unquote, doing well, yes, doing well on the surface, but there were deep issues, including issues when it comes to the borrowing. And I am very much convinced in my mind that we have been reckless when it comes to borrowing and when it comes to spending. You can look at that in a number of ways. But quickly, if you look at the statement again that the president made, that it is worth noting that the debts that we are servicing were not only contracted during the period of this administration. Yes, that is true. But if you give or look at it in the final detail, a lot of it actually has been contracted during this administration. So I prepared a little table that I shared with your producers just to maybe put on the screen for the benefit of Ghanaians. Let's just use the Eurobond as one of the examples here. All of Kufuor's administration, it was 750 million. John Mahama borrowed 3.75 billion. And the Akufo-Addo administration from 2018 to 2021, before we lost access to the capital market, had borrowed 11.05 billion. So almost 3 times as much as John Mahama had borrowed, and almost about 10 times as much as John Kufuor had also borrowed in that respect. So the idea for me that we have not been reckless in borrowing and spending, and sometimes what people say is quote unquote smart borrowing.
He talks about the unprecedented road construction, and he says much of the borrowing has gone there. He says here is the evidence of the road works that have gone on. How do you challenge him?
So what is the quality of the roads that have been constructed, right? Number 2, you also need to borrow with an ability to actually service back your debt. And what clearly we have found ourselves in is that we are almost broke as a country and cannot service our debt. Just a couple of weeks ago, we got further downgrade on our credit rating. So if you say you've not been reckless, and the data and the evidence clearly shows that we have been on an unsustainable path that has led down this way. I mean, it's for Ghanaians to come up to whatever conclusion they want to make on it. But the data is very clear in terms of the borrowing path. But there are also some positives. I mean, it's not all negative in that sense. So if you want to really do a full analysis or assessment on, let's say, the economy, for me, there are 7 indicators that I often look at, from GDP growth to inflation to lending rates to the external sector, and then to exchange rates and things like the fiscal operations. And then on the social side of things, I would look at things like the harmony on the labor front, and then the general sense of security that Ghanaians feel. And that's where, when I analyzed all of these collectively, I think, I would score the government 5 out of 10. But a bit of the positive out of all of this really is that when you look at our external sector, particularly our trade balance, for the last couple of, about a year or so, we actually have been exporting more as a country than we are importing. So if you look at last year's numbers, we exported $17.4 billion worth of goods, and then we actually imported just under 15 billion. So that gave us a positive trade balance. So ideally, what this should have done is then to show up our reserves and allow us to have a much better city. But because you also had a negative outflow from your balance of payments, and specifically your capital account and then your the financial account, that then means that all these positive trade balance that we got is more or less been offset by those outflows. Hence why we're seeing our gross reserves dwindling from 9.7 billion as of December 2021, or 4.3 months of import cover, now down to 2.7 months or 6.3 billion as of December 2022. So that's really, it's for me, the state of the economy. Ghanaians are feeling it in their pocket. Inflation is 54%. Exchange rate year to date, we're talking almost 20% depreciation. And we all know what is happening with the debt situation and the debt restructuring and the IMF program, which perhaps we can come back to in a moment.
Okay, thank you. Now, let me come to Steve. And Steve, I found something really curious. The president took us back to his 2020 State of the Nation address. And in that 2020 State of the Nation address, he referred to rating agencies, upgrading Ghana's ratings and also improving Ghana's outlook for the year, notwithstanding the fact that it was an election year. I'm surprised to hear the president go back to his speech and isolate portions, including when rating agencies were praising the country. The president has been attacking the rating agencies. He's gone to the level of his peers, to say that they should do something to have a local and not have this. We have had statements issued attacking rating agencies.
Samson, thank you very much. I don't know where you pick just this, I should speak to this. I'm not saying you are wrong, but I'm not really understanding what you're talking about.
You could answer that briefly and then proceed.
I'm saying that because the statement you are making, I'm not really aware exactly what the president said, the context in which he used.
It's here. I'm
not saying it's not there, but I'm saying that what you are saying, I should have listened to the president, the context in which he used. So
listen to him in Parliament.
Yeah, but I can't emphasize what you're saying. Can I go straight and speak to the issues?
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Samson, the point I'm making is that it is true that this country, we are suffering. Nobody can argue about that fact. Any honest person will say that this country, we are not doing well. It is also very true that globally and continentally, we are also suffering. As a continent, as a globe, as a nation or a state, that is a fact. You have some of the countries whose some of the primary indicators are better than Ghana, and others you have better than those countries. And that is why it is totally unacceptable. That's my opinion. For anybody to compare one country to another, because we have different dynamics. We have different dynamics. That's a fact. Our expenditures, our internal policies, rolling out social intervention for infrastructure needs and other things are different.
The issue is that you're saying that, and the president has said, which you guys have repeated umpteen times, that it was COVID that took us off, the trajectory, and it was Russia, Ukraine. So you heard it being asked of you. You say it affected the whole world. So what's wrong? Your neighbor is not as bad as you are.
No, that's not true. Let me tell you. If you talk of my neighbor, I'm saying that there are other areas we are also doing better than our neighbors. That's a fact. We have a lot of parameters. 2, I heard people talk about Ivory Coast and Co. They don't even have economic sovereignty. Listen, we keep on saying it. Ghana is sometimes one country that I don't understand some of the people. That because this is what we want to say, nobody can bring anything that we can all say that, oh, maybe initially I was wrong or right, but this is the picture. A country such as Ivory Coast is directly linked to the Central Bank of France. I don't think they even have central bank to determine their own monetary policies and ABCD. Aside, I'm saying that some of the countries have different infrastructural, social needs and implementations. That is why it's always acceptable doing industry performance against individual firms' performance. So you talk about, that's why they said that, the globe was anticipated to grow or to have grown negative 0.3. Remember when the COVID really got hit the world so much. African continent grew negative to 0.2. Ghana grew 0.4. So you do industry or continent or globe against an individual member. That's the best thing to go. Samson, put that aside. I don't think the president ever said all the happenings of today in terms of our economic needs is because of the COVID, and he never said that. What I heard is that we were doing well, Ghana was doing well till the COVID and the war. And he underpinned that statement by the emphatic statement made by the head of IMF. And I think that is a fact. Let's not behave like the president said that everything in Ghana. The previous analyst who spoke, I clearly understand most of the things he said. But let's be very honest, even practically without some of us who understand this finance and economic stuff, the very issues we raised, even when we were kids, during late former President Rawlings, may he so rest in peace, were the same thing raised during Omanpenyi Kufuor. The parameters are clearly known, things that we normally complain, from corruption, wastages, unemployment, lack of good roads, they are there. Through late Professor Mills, may he so rest in peace, and former President Mahama, and then the current president, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So, as a country, Samson, we have some things, fundamentals, that are anomalous, are wrong, that we want to, that one they are there. But the severity and the acute nature of what's happening today, and that's why when the president came, he was so humble, he was honest to me, and accepted the fact that there were challenges. That is a fact. But he used the opportunity to also answer certain key questions and also underpin the fact that it's globally induced. One, before that thing happened, what was the average growth of this country? About 7% for 3 years. Since 92 was the only period for about 3 years we are having deficit of about 5%. Although some people move it to 7, even that one, it's something that is recommendable. Sorry, it's commendable. Sorry, you understand what I'm saying? They even went further to say that there are a lot of other primary macro indicators that today they are not bad until the COVID, and this is clear. Unless you want to lie, let me tell you, lending rate before we took over was almost 40%. It came down to about 20% in the banking industry.
By what year?
Oh, just before the COVID. So you know what I'm talking about. If you check from the banks, 21, 20 is a fact.
I'm just
in
asking
fact,
for information.
Policy rate, which is the government own interest rate, that's how I put it in a very simple term, was about 25.5. It came to about 12. T-bills have reduced from about 22.5 to about 12 and 14, the same period. So if somebody says the country was doing well, but for this thing, that is a fact. You cannot argue. But I also understand that we couldn't have said that everything is just because of the war. Because as a country, we have a lot of, perpetual issues of
Before COVID, were there warnings, including from experts locally, that the borrowing was getting unsustainable?
Today, let me explain something to you. If I'm lying, we have professors on board. Let's talk and bring internationals. Borrowing has gone up. It's a fact. But we have something called uncontrollable factors when you are appraising somebody's performance. One, we had a long period of impaired productivity uncontrollably in this country, where even we asked people not to go to work, but they were paid in our country. In fact, at a point, even the whole country had to stop going to work. And then after that, if 10 people were going to work, 5 would be allowed to go, other 5 would not go, and they were being paid. Private sector sacked about 40,000 people. If the records we all have, we stated in Parliament before, we lost payee greatly, we lost corporate taxes greatly, we had revenue shortfall over 11 billion, something. If you're having impaired productivity, your domestically generated revenue uncontrollably will go down. Yet you have obligations you needed to perform as a country.
Which you got more than a cushion.
That is not true. Let me explain.
Wait.
More than what we needed. Some say the facts are here. What we got here, how we use the money, they are here. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you, when you do this, even the way how I want to put my things.
Why, you just want to come on the show and just talk, no question to you?
No, when I end my statement, they ask me. I'm not saying
but you
that.
never really end. So if I ask a question...
I end one point. That's what I'm saying. Please, can you allow me?
See how you started. I asked you a question. You decided you are not interested in answering my question, but you would commence the way you prefer. I allowed you.
You see, asked about another statement. I felt I didn't have.
That's all right. That's all right. But,
so I wanted to speak on what
I just wanted to say that it's all right. There's nothing wrong that you are speaking, and I'm trying to get you to explain something or something like that.
When I end my,
you never really end. If you check,
I'm not saying when I end everything. Something.
You never end.
Can you get me? What I'm saying is that if I have a point and I end the point, you can ask me. But when I start and you ask me, then even when I come back,
there's no way to know when you have ended the point.
Okay, you ask me, I'll answer. I just ask you.
I was only saying you were talking about what we have gone through as COVID and Ukraine war. Particularly in COVID, we are clearly aware of how much money that the government got.
No, something. I was explaining why we got here. The debt, you raise it. If I hadn't finished and asked me how much we got, then I'm out of my point. That's what I want to say. Because I had to end with explanation of why we got here. Then this one comes in. That one is a fact.
We are talking about we stopped going to work, people were not working.
Because you asked me, and which is a legitimate.
Okay, please go on, just go on.
The point I was making.
Proceed. Yes, just go on.
The point I was making is that it is justifiable for Ghana to get where we are because of the impaired productivity. Anybody can argue from any point.
This didn't happen to only Ghana.
Yes, but other countries are suffering. Look, post-COVID inflationary rate of the world was about 3%, like 300%. You can check. I'm not comparing country to country, but even the giant economies, they were moving from 1.8 averagely, some of them to 11%. As I'm talking to you now, some of the giant economies, what is happening to them? Their debt to GDPs have moved beyond 100%. The point I'm making to you is that Check all over the world. Some countries are doing better than Ghana. Ghana doing better than some countries. But if you pick up the global performance and the continental performance, then you can accept the fact that our situation largely induced by the COVID and the war. Look, we're importing things at about $4,000. The same item, because of COVID and war, we're importing them at about $14,000, $12,000 in this country. Is that not true?
The same World Bank you quote.
I'm not quoting this for having quoted
no,
World Bank.
I said you,
it's a practical thing in the country.
You as in the government. The same World Bank you quote. And the president, gladly quotes and say, oh, we have been told that, oh, it was actually COVID that took you out of the trajectory. The same World Bank had said that the situation was getting really bad before COVID.
I think
that's one you are not interested in.
Are you telling me I'm not? So the IMF, which is the same as the World Bank, last statement confirmed emphatically, and this is more even emphatic than what you're talking about in terms of emphasis, that Ghana was doing so much well till the COVID and the war. So what are you also talking about? Samson, let's be honest with God and man. Ghana has fundamental challenges and issues. Everybody accepts that. But you can't tell me that if you have a wife and you're paying for the child's school fees, everything is going well, you're happy. Something happens to you uncontrollably and you're not able to perform the way it's, and there's evidence that it happened in the whole community. Everybody is suffering. Almost, buildings and families are suffering. They want to say that for yours, it's never yours.
And I get billions in dollars of support.
How can you? Other countries got billions. They still move 100 over that. What are you talking about? But even with that situation, some of the same parameters we are trying to say, oh, this government is a worst case scenario. They are better than we took over. We're growing 3.4%. Are we growing the same today? Even when Africa grew -2, 0.2, and the world predicted -3, 0.3, we grew 0.4. Let's sometimes be honest with ourselves.
Let me show you what the president now had to say about borrowing and the problem with it. So let's listen. Wait, hold on. Let's listen to the president before he became president.
That we can have a debt portfolio for our country that is sustainable is to make sure that the NDC loses this election in December. Kicking out the NDC will be the surest way we can to protect the debt structure of our country. Why do I say that? In the 4 years in which they have been in power, they have more than tripled our national debt. From 9 billion cedis, which was at the end of Kufuor's period, to 28 billion cedis today. In the 4 years of the NDC administration, they have contracted more debt than all the governments of our country, from Kwame Nkrumah right down to John Ajay Kufuor. That is the nature of the situation confronting our country. And I dare say the president would agree with me that without the rebasing of the economy, the debt profile of our country today will be getting towards epic proportions.
So, I'll come to you now, Sam George.
Oh, so it's fair. I answer what you
No, wait. So, this is what this president had to say about the debt. And today, he's presiding over unprecedented debt level that accounts for where we are in now. That is the basis for the minority saying he is not talking about the state of the nation.
Samson, the president engaged in a debt exchange program with the truth when he addressed Parliament. He simply just substituted the truth for alternative facts. Like you rightly pointed out, he spoke about a tripling in national debt, but we had projects to show for those. We have seen ×5, quintupling, if that's the right word, where we've moved from 120 billion in national debt to almost 600 billion. That's 500% increase. And we can't see the projects. In fact, what the president is doing right now is covetousness. He's coveting projects of other administrations and claiming that they are his. And I will show you clear evidence of that in my submission. But let's be clear in our minds. The president was very economical with the truth in his entire submission. And that's why the president was at pains to quote figures from 2020 and not quote figures from 2023, even though he was presenting a 2023 State of the Nations address. You expect to get an understanding. Nobody says don't quote 2020, but when you quote the 2020 figures, then you tell us what is the state of the nation today. The president gave a typical example of petrol prices and said last year we're buying petrol at almost 20 cedis, and now we are buying it at 13 cedis. And so he expected some praise for good work done. But the question is, when we handed over power to you, a gallon of fuel, which is 4.5 liters, was selling at 14 cedis. Now you are selling a liter, less than 25% of what we gave to you, about 22% of what we gave to you at 14 cedis for 13 cedis. And you say we should praise you. The president again, and let me go into the infrastructure. And I will just show to you the inconsistency of the president. In the 2022 State of the Nations address, this is what the president said, and I'm going to quote verbatim. In the 5 years of my government, so far, more roads have been built, improved, and upgraded than at any equivalent period under any government in the history of Ghana. So that would suggest that since 1957, this was his claim. Then he said some 10,875 kilometers of new roads, not existing roads, new roads have been constructed in these 5 years. Now let me read what he said this past Wednesday. Mr. Speaker, I would like to state categorically that this government has built more roads, he's taking away the new, more roads than any government in the history of the Fourth Republic. He's now run away from independence to just the Fourth Republic. The inconsistency of the president. And he says that the details are in this annex. And this annex that has been presented is the most shoddy piece of work any government has done in our history. I can look at Greater Accra, for example. And you know, it is painful to me as a Dangme MP and as a Dangme boy, that this government has put out clear evidence. This is the same government that, don't forget, put out a budget that excluded the Volta region. The Volta region had to complain. I think the 5 Dangme constituencies will also have to do the same. When you look at this, in the 6 years of this government, there is actually no work done in any of the 5 Dangme constituencies. This is the Greater Accra report. This is the president's own report that he presented to Parliament. Take this report. The Greater Accra region is there. Stick, I give it to you, and I can open it. Greater Accra for
How can you bring this here?
The president said no constituency has been left out.
And I'm saying to you something. This is Greater Accra. This is Greater Accra. Samson. This is Greater Accra. This is asphaltic overlay. Asphaltic overlays. Starting on page 91 of 293, and it goes all the way. It goes all the way. I'm not talking about any other region. I'm talking about my region. It goes all the way from page 93 to page 1. And Greater Accra did get a large chunk of the roads to page 159. From 99 to 159. I'm saying that there is not one single project in Ponkatamanto, which is a Dangme constituency. Not one in Nigo Prampram, which is a Dangme constituency. Not one in Shayo Sudoku, which is a Dangme constituency, not one in Sege, which is a Dangme constituency, and not one in Adan. The 5 Dangme constituencies in the eastern block of Greater Accra. I am daring anybody to show me from the president's own appendix he gave one project that is in any of those 5 constituencies. This is the asphaltic overlay, Ministry of Roads and Highways, regional breakdown of
no constituency.
And I'm telling you, the president engaged in a debt exchange program with the truth. I'm just giving you evidence. I'm showing you 5 Dangme constituencies in Greater Accra. Not one inch. I'm not talking of a kilometer. Per their own report was done in any of those five constituencies. And so that's what I'm saying.
Could be an oversight, maybe.
Well, that's why I'm highlighting. But I'm MP for Ningo Prampram. The last time the Ningo Prampram constituency saw an asphaltic overlay was in 2016 under the streets of Tema, when President Mahama made us get 14 kilometers of asphalt through Prampram all the way to Old Ningo. Nothing of that nature has happened in my constituency. So I can state on authority that not 1 inch of asphalt has been laid in 6 years in my constituency. And per the government's own report, I am saying from page 99 to page 159 of this report, the 5, not just Ningo Prampram, the 5 Dangme constituencies, the president has not done 1 inch of asphaltic overlay in there because he doesn't see us as Ghanaian enough. Now,
so it is a question of asphalt or no road project at all.
The large chunk of what they've done in Greater Accra is asphaltic overlay. Now, when you go to between pages 93 to 98 of the report,
I have my copy.
Again, they give completed projects, all regions. Now, in the 5 Dangme regions, again, constituencies again in the region.
You haven't answered my question.
I'm answering you, that's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
I'm saying that between page 93 and 98, they've listed all other projects outside of the asphaltic overlay. And I'm saying that in those projects that they have listed, in the 5 Dangme constituencies, there is only one that has been done. And that project is number 217.
Okay, at which page?
On page 95.
95, okay, go on.
Number 217, Greater Accra. Agency, Department of Urban Roads, Activity, Rehabilitation, Project Description, Rehabilitation of Jerusalem Road, Ningo Pram Pram. Length, 1.5 kilometers, that is completed. I have constituents who are watching me. That road starts at New Jerusalem, is supposed to connect to Apollonia. That road was, the contractor on that road was Mrs. Mawums. For 2.5 years, Mawums is not on that road. Just 3 months ago, I had cause to go to the Minister of Roads and Dr. Abbas, the Chief Director, to raise the fact that the rains that fell actually cut off the road in 2 because the contractor has abandoned site for 2.5 years due to lack of payment. Yet they report that it is completed. And I say to you that in all the projects, so from page 93 to 159, where they have listed all the projects, when it comes to asphaltic overlay, none in the 5 Dangme constituencies. Yeah. When it comes to all other projects, only one in Ningo Pram Pram. In all the 5 Dangme constituencies, none in Adan, none in Sege, none in Chayo Sudoku, none in Katamanso. And the one in Ningo Pram Pram that they claim they've completed has not been completed. This is the dishonesty of the president. I'll give you a typical example of how dishonest the president was again. When the president said that we have so much freedom of speech that the diplomatic community is engaged in, the president forgets that on Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, he summoned the diplomatic community to Peduasi and issued them a stern warning to stop commenting on national issues. And that if they had any issues or evidence of corruption, they should bring it to his office. And was categorical in his condemnation of the American ambassador at the time, Sullivan. You understand me? And said she should have brought information to his office. Well, the diplomatic community is aware that every time we have taken corruption activities to the notice of the president, he has cleared them. Was the president in this country when there was a certain John Benjamin? Now let me take you to even my area, where I would say I have some level of expertise, where the president says that 93% of total fiber in our country.
East Legon Hills, does it fall within Katamanso?
It depends on what part. Part of it is part of the Adenta, and part of it is Katamanso. So it depends on which part of East Legon Hills that you are in.
Yes, but to that extent,
yes,
there is work there. So you cannot say categorically that
if you can mention which, because you see, I have given you.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll be right back. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform, and my guest on this second segment, Dr. Theo Champong, Mary Ada, whom I'll go to shortly, Dr. Stephen Amwa and Samuel Nete George. And I paused him to check something, to be double sure about something. And I find that on page 116, if you look at what we may call paragraph 691, there is Katamanso, yes, KKMA, Katamanso 0.85, and that is an asphaltic road, correct?
Yes, and Samson, when you pointed that out to me, I admitted that is one instance of Katamanso.
Okay.
But now,
wait, hold on. Yeah,
Samson, we have 912 paragraphs, projects in Greater Accra. There are 5 Dangme constituencies, and we can only identify one in Katamanso out of 912. My point is made. If you think that out of if stickers and not you, sticker and government thinks that out of 912 projects in Greater Accra, the 5 Dangme constituencies, only Katamanso gets one.
Okay. So in fairness, in the apportionment of the time, I'll give you 3 minutes, then I move on to someone else. Yeah.
I was speaking.
Please, 3 minutes, I'll stop you.
Yes, I was speaking about fiber. The president made the claim, and this is what the president said. Beyond the construction of roads, Mr. Speaker, this NPP administration has constructed more NCA licensed fiber optic cables than any other government in the Fourth Republic. 93% of our total. That's incorrect. Because in Ghana, currently the biggest or longest stretch of fiber is the Eastern Corridor fiber. That Eastern Corridor fiber was commissioned or was cut for it by Harun Idrisu in September 2012, then Minister for Communications. It was commissioned in May 2015 by Omane Boamah and President Mahama. 800 kilometers, starting from Ho with extensions to Uhas all the way to Boku, running through 122 kilometers. This government comes in 2017 and does an extension from Ho to Accra, 165 kilometers. How a government that did 800 kilometers can be said to have done less than a government that did 165 kilometers beats my imagination. Then you have the Metro Fiber. The Metro Fiber, we have the Bemakam campus, 40 kilometers, completed in 2016. You have the Kolebu campus, 35 kilometers, completed in 2016. You have the Accra Metro Fiber, 200 kilometers, completed in 2016. Tamale Metro Fiber, 51 kilometers, completed in 2016. Ho Metro, 30 kilometers, completed in 2017. All of this are Government of Ghana fiber, owned 100% by the Government of Ghana. Under the NDC, on the 10th of July 2015, Omane Boamah again was there to commission another fiber project by Internet Solutions, Mrs. Internet Solutions, and then Felix Okfosu represented Omane Boamah again in 2016 when Google launched the 1,200 kilometer metro fiber project in Accra, Tema, and Kumasi. Okay. So this is the NDC's track record. Now, under the NPP, and I end here in 30 seconds, the NCA has only licensed 5 agencies since 2017 to do fiber. Comsys, Spectrum Fiber, Gridco, Vobis, and Group Vivendi Africa. Of all of this, the only company that is now constructing fiber is Spectrum Fiber, which is doing the Western Corridor Fiber project, which is another 880 kilometer fiber project, which has not been completed. So our total national fiber holding is just under 7,000 kilometers of fiber. 5,680 kilometers was done under the NDC. How can President Akufo claim that?
Thank you. Mary, I know that for you, from where you sit, good governance, issues of corruption. Corruption didn't feature actually. I'm not sure. I heard the word, but there were issues that were mentioned that had to do with corruption. From where you sit, from the Ghana Integrity Initiative, let me not limit you. What is it that caught your attention in this address that is the real state of the economy, or it's not?
Thank you very much, Samson. Good morning to you, your viewers, and also to the other panelists. I believe that a lot has been said today for which some have caught my attention. I think that incrementally the president is beginning to acknowledge the enormity of the challenges this country is facing. And in acknowledging that, despite the fact that he attributes the challenges as you have been discussing to COVID and Ukraine, which to some extent, perhaps we would say if they had not occurred, we would have moved in a different trajectory. But we also know that even before that, there were warnings of the way we were going. And for me, what has caught my eye in the past 2 State of the Nation's addresses is the conscious effort to eliminate the issue of corruption in the State of the Nation addresses. It's not emphasized. Yet still, we know that this is a president and a government who came to power wholly on an anti-corruption message. We agree, admittedly, that they've done some things in that regard, but we also know that a lot has happened, which is unfortunately fueled the issues around corruption. And for me, I thought that the president should remain focused on that agenda, because we know that in systems where transparency and accountability thrive, we are able to secure some resources which then would be utilized for the development we all
What else should he have said about corruption? For example, he debunked the issues about COVID spending, that there has been corruption in them. The community and school spraying exercises, he told us that the claims that there's corruption there is not correct.
Something I just wanted to tell you that those claims, and I was coming to that the unfortunate assertions he continues to make that there were no wrongdoings. It's very unfortunate. It makes the citizens he wants us to be insignificant, because these same citizens bring out issues. And so we should merit them with some level of respect. that we can think we know what is happening and we have done research. For instance, let me take us back to the 2020 where he made assertions that this country was doing very well until COVID. It is also a fact that 2020 we had elections and there were issues, serious issues, where we had a DCE also speaking to the fact that COVID money had come through her hands to be utilized for whatever it was, you do not know. And this is something that happened, which advocacy was done on and nothing happened. If you remember, we spoke to issues around the Sputnik V vaccine and the issues around the procurement and how it was dealt with. Again, this is an advocacy that you were involved with, which came to nothing. Parliament itself took over the issue and we didn't have anything to show for it. So for me, the fact that the president continues to do this, and when they say he's a clearing agent, he takes serious exception to, it's unfortunate. If you remember, again in 2020 and 2021, the Ghana Integrity Initiative undertook a corruption risk assessment of the government of Ghana interventions they had put in place to see the robustness of these when it comes to the risk assessment metrics and looking at transparency of the processes, accountability of these processes, participation of the citizenry in them. You realize that most of them came up with red flags, and if we are mentioning specific projects, we could mention some of them. Procurement was a serious issue because the Procurement Act says in emergencies you can't procure using single source or restricted procurement methods, which was then wholesale. And then when it came to people providing evidence to support some of these procurements, it became a problem. And we all know this. There are more. Currently, we have issues around the NDA, where the both of us come from, which we expect to see a lot of action going into.
But there's been a lot of action. There's been a lot of action. The two deputy CEOs that were dismissed, he's gone ahead to appoint a new CEO, which means the CEO himself has also been done away with, and there's prosecution that is going on. Forgive me, but we have actually run out of time. But I want Steve here briefly, Steve, because of the clip I played and the question of debt and Sam George's response. In a minute.
In a minute, yes. I think just before then, let's get this clear. I checked from here. Eastern region, roads done and ongoing, it's less than 6 billion, if I get my units correct here. Greater Accra alone is over 19 billion. In terms of percentage, Eastern region, yes, Eastern region, the percentage to the total is 7%. Greater Accra, 26%. So I don't think our president is the type that will do what my brother here is saying. Initially, he said nothing. The people they are not part of Ghana. I think we need to be careful the things we say to depolarize this country. We are a country of unity and love. Okay. We need to build the needed cohesion and move this country forward. But Samson, just to end with what he said, this issue about what the president said, look at the timing. I keep on saying that we have never had a situation we have today before that compared us to increase our debt financing arm of the total financing of this government. And the GDP was not growing uncontrollably. And yet this is a situation, don't also forget that in Parliament, because of the seemingly balance, my brother here and his friends make sure that they impaired every single revenue generation policy that could let us be in a good light. Okay. That didn't even work. Right.
My guests have been Dr. Theo Champong, economist and political risk analyst, Mary Ada is programs manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative, Dr. Stephen Amwa, MP in Shaeso, and Samuel Nete George is MP in Ingo Pram. My outfit, as always, is by Habil Scooter. Have a good afternoon. I'm Samson Lardy, Anyenini.